One minute before we wrap up completely, and then you escape on Friday afternoon, is just very quickly go over some of the things, the themes that we saw through the conference. We've got a little bit of housekeeping at the end as well. So the first thing, before anything else, is to say thank you guys for coming. So we were very surprised when we started planning the conference at what the interest was like, or rather when we first released tickets for the conference, what the interest was like. There's far more people coming than we thought. And Brian Kelly is very kindly set up, he's not here anymore, but he's very kindly set up a lanyard page to the conference. So if you want to go and say that you attended and get the contact details for other people and leave the slides and everything, please do. Ian's mentioned it already, so I won't go over it again. On the conference website, there's some details of a research grant that was kindly sponsored by Thomson Reuters. So if you go on there, it's not a huge amount of money, but it's enough to do something cool with, I think. And it's a fairly open-ended thing in that it's not prescriptive. You have to use it for this kind of research. If you have a good idea, you've heard something interesting in the past few days, and you thought, well, we should do a little project about that. Not going to fund a PhD for a year or anything, but it's a good start. So in terms of what the conference was like, over the past few days, this is the first thing. It was pretty different to what I expected. There was definitely some things I didn't expect. So Slashfic, so some of the slash fiction stuff yesterday, in the context of ethics, it all made sense of things. Sexy archaeology from Hans this morning. Ian's emoji of all kinds. And this is actually a positive one, conference Wi-Fi. Maybe too cynical, I just assume now that when I go to a conference, no one's going to be able to live tweet it or anything. And this one was different. I think the Wi-Fi worked for everyone. I saw a lot of tweeting going on, a lot of live blogging, and I'll come to that in a little bit. I was speaking to James Hardcastle from Taylor and Francis earlier this morning, and he was saying maybe a success because we haven't talked about some of the things that come up normally when you talk about Altmetrics, especially in a certain crowd. And the first thing being that the top few articles are usually, when you're looking at what's popular and what's getting public engagement, it's like the budget calls for scientific papers. It's papers that are about sex or cannabis or weight loss, or Winnie the Pooh is the one that we always see. There's a difference about article Altmetrics and Altmetrics, and then also this came up before, the whole renaming and redefining Altmetrics. And it's possible to spend a long time, and I think a lot of us know from bitter experience, it's possible to spend a long time negotiating the semantics of this with lots of different stakeholders. So just to ruin that, I thought one of the things we learned from this conference is that actually, that is to some extent necessary. And again, Ian pointed out, we've kind of dealt with it now by saying, look, that's the name, let's stick with it. But for people new to the field, sometimes they do still get hung up. That's definitely come up as previous points in this conference. Altmetrics, don't get hung up on the metrics bit. It's not necessarily that people are saying just use the numbers, just because it has metrics in the name of the field. It's misleading, but it's the best name we have at the moment. If you come up with a better one, maybe that should be the $2,500. No? Okay. All right. So what were some of the things? I'm going to go quickly through these Jason librarians. Today it was more publishers. And all those different groups have different uses for Altmetrics. I think that's important to remember. So we talk about research evaluation in the context of funders, but actually for publishers it could be more about discovery, or it could be more about an author service, this kind of thing. For a librarian, it could be research support, help authors communicate, or it could be more like a comms office or a marketing office type initiative. So there's all sorts of different ways you can use the data, and the thing is that what is a good way for one constituency to use data isn't necessarily the way that everyone else should use it as well. There's a tendency, I think, to view Altmetrics through the prism of your own use case, if you like. That's not necessarily helpful. It doesn't need to be that way. Definitions, I think, again, we talked about the name already, but it is very important, especially when you get a conference like this and there's lots of those different groups together. So yesterday in the breakout session we had quite an interesting discussion, I thought, there was a point well made about how, for example, in publishing, at least in STM publishing, when we talk about impact, we're talking about citations and the impact factor, and there's kind of a shorthand around that. It's kind of understood what you mean, but when you talk about impact to someone in a research admin office, or the impact in terms of rep, it's something completely different. You're more elucidating impact. You're talking about sort of the pathways to impact and kind of showing things along that pathway. The impact is what happens at the end. It's not the fact that you have 10 tweets that's the impact. It's the fact that those tweets influence something at the end. This one again, I mean, it comes up quite a lot. I thought it was good to point out. Altmetrics is obviously much more than just tweets. I mean, it's more than social media as well, actually, but especially more than tweets. I fall victim to this all the time, and a lot of the slides we saw, dealt with Twitter as the main examples of things, but it's not necessarily the be-all and end-all of everything. So that said, we do have some vanity metrics. This is like the anti-Altmetric, having said that Twitter isn't everything and that numbers aren't important. We beat the Altmetrics 14 hashtag. Yes. By quite a substantial margin as well. That was a good conference, by the way, Altmetrics. On a more serious note, I thought Adam's talk yesterday was very good. I thought this prescription for the data was quite important and worth mentioning again. So if you remember, he was talking about how the data should be consistent and transparent and available. I thought it was a very interesting conversation earlier this morning with Jeff and Cameron when they were talking about the infrastructure. And this was a question worth asking. Do we want to look back in 10 years and say, oh, I wish we'd stepped in and done something with Altmetrics before the industry took it over? The corollary, as I'm giving this talk, I'll give the alternate view, which is, in 10 years you could be looking back and going, I wish we'd given this to industry, and then we could be so much further ahead. Instead, I have to have my next board meeting with the other 12 members of the committee. And anyway, sorry. Okay, hit descend there. All right, fair enough. I'll just get that. Incentives come up. So, if there is value in this sort of thing, and you could take public engagement as an example of one of the things there might be value in. Do we need to change the environment the researchers operate in to allow them to sort of take part in that? And then how do we do that? Do we do it through training? Do we do it through case studies? Or do we do it with prizes or something that's come up a couple of times? Coming to the end, so research outputs. Again, we heard a lot about this today. Article level metrics is not the same as Altmetrics. We're talking about articles, but actually we should be generalizing to research outputs, and that could be software, it could be book chapters, it could be data sets. And on that note, we shouldn't forget our humanities. I think it is interesting that a lot of the Altmetrics tool providers come from STM effectively. There's not that kind of feedback, again, in the service providers from humanities and social sciences. Finally, on this, and this was something that came up just in the last couple of sessions, but there's still a lot of room to work with the data. Someone said it before, and I can't remember who it was now, but they were saying we're in this unusual position where we have a lot of data, but we don't necessarily understand it. We haven't started with the question and then found the data. We've got the data, now we need to do the other way around. And there's lots of room to contextualize it. Again, we talked in the sessions before this about getting more demographics on the data to visualize it, this kind of thing. So those were the themes as I saw. I'm sure I missed some out. Luckily, the entire conference was blogged, and you can find it if you go to the main conference website, altmetricsconference.com, and there's a blog tab. You'll get into the WordPress instance, and there's been a lot of people blogging over the past couple of days. I think there's still some posts to go up. They're not all on there yet. But for each session, there's relatively detailed notes. So if you popped out for a coffee or something in one of the sessions, or you're listening remotely and you didn't catch all of it, there's a chance to catch up on what was said. And tying into that, and the working Wi-Fi, I think it's worth calling out all the people that were live tweeting it. I was really impressed. So Mr. Gunn and Todd were called out there, but actually there was a whole bunch of people who I started writing down everyone's names and I realized there's too many of them. So apology if you ran out if you're in the ... but thanks very much. And also thanks, of course, to the people that helped organize it and who've actually been running the past few days. So George and Kat and Fran, wherever they are. And to everyone else that helped put the program together. And we'll see you at 2 a.m. So first we'll see you at the Bitumen Arms, possibly, which is just down Euston Road, because you're all welcome to. Thanks.